Okay, and it's 11:01, which is usually when we get started. So good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us for the last webinar of 2020, or of How We Build This Toronto. So we have a special guest for you to conclude this. By the way, I checked, we had 16 speakers. And we just started in mid-June, which is amazing. Yeah, I know, Lirad, I forgot to tell you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for joining us this morning, which, as I said, it's a pretty good day for a webinar, so it's not like it's sunny outside. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Nama Blonder. I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density, and my co-host and friend is Lirad Kligman, the co-founder of the Yorkville team, a residential and commercial sales team in Toronto. We started How We Build This Toronto to get a chance to have a casual conversation with the leaders in the real estate industry and get a chance to ask them the questions that have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial perspective to the discussion, but to get a chance to ask and discuss the why and the story behind the movement they built. Lirad, please introduce our guest for today.
Yes, so it's our privilege to be joined today by Mr. Alex Speigel of Windmill Developments. So a bit of a background on him. So Alex has designed and developed a wide range of innovative projects in the city, commercial, residential, and mixed use over the past 40 years. As partner in charge of Windmill Development's Toronto office, he's currently directing a diverse range of sustainable infill projects underway in urban Toronto and Guelph. Prior to Windmill, Alex was director of development with Context Developments from 1996 to 2006. He directed residential mixed-use projects in Toronto, including the District Lofts, Ideal Condominium, Mozo, Radio City, Home, and Spire, as well as several adaptive reuse projects in the city. Now, before going down the developer path, Alex practiced architecture in Toronto, Vancouver, Alberta, and Jerusalem. Alex has served as an advisor to many community organizations and nonprofits, including the Center for Social Innovation, Toronto Community Housing, Artscape, TDSB, as well as the Kahila Residential Program for Affordable Housing. So Alex, thank you so much for joining us here today. And to kick it off, why don't you just tell us a bit about your background and your path, about how you started off in architecture and ended up where you are today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here today. My background is in architecture. I studied, well, I would say my background is in construction. My family kind of was in the construction world, going back to my grandfather. So he started a small construction company in Northern Ontario, and I guess I have it in my blood and kind of grew up on construction sites and speaking about development around the family dining room table. Decided to go into architecture. I was never going to go into development and my family business as a young man. And then I found as an architect a bit of frustration, I suppose, in not being the client. I found that by the time I came in as an architect in a project, many of the key decisions had already been made. The site had been found, the program had been set. And I guess for me, my path to development was really wanting to be more in control of the overall project and have more impact through the entire development process. So really becoming the client instead of the architect.
And so you have, Windmill is pretty distinct from most other developers in the city, and your focus on the triple bottom line, the environment, sustainability. So I'm curious what sort of led you down that path rather than the traditional conventional developer?
Interesting question. Yes, Kermit the Frog would say it's not easy being green. I mean, my interest in sustainability goes right back to my architectural education. When I was at Carleton University in the 70s, the oil crisis happened in 73. And that was a kind of a wake-up call back then that we really just couldn't go on consuming resources the way we were consuming them. So it's always been, I would say, since the early 70s, a very strong interest of mine. I'm very much an outdoors person. I like hiking and skiing and kayaking, and love spending time in nature, but also just see the imperative of taking care of the planet and doing whatever we all can to make sure that it's in better shape when we turn it over to our children and grandchildren than when we received it. So it really started through my architectural education, doing like solar buildings back in the 70s that were quite crude by today's definition, but that was, I guess, my interest. I worked in Vancouver for several firms that were focused on energy. And so it's always really been a strong interest of mine. When I was at Context Development, Context was very focused on design and I would say innovative urban projects, not so much on green things. So I was known as the communist or the token green guy in the office. And I found it, as much as it was a great experience working at Context, it was always a little frustrating because whenever I would try and bring forward a kind of focus on sustainability, people would say, well, why do you want to do that? There was always this why. So the great thing about now being with Windmill is nobody asks why. We have I guess a shared why. We all know why. We all ask how. We ask what. We ask how much, but nobody asks why. So it's a given. So that's, I would suppose, the quick answer in terms of my arc of interest. It's always been very strong for me, and I find at Windmill we're all aligned and we have that sort of common purpose based on a triple bottom line.
And that is exactly my question, the triple bottom line. What are the three components and what is the balance or what is the challenge?
Well, it is a challenge and it is a balancing act every day, frankly. So triple bottom line is basically people, planet, and prosperity. So people meaning social bottom line, planet meaning environmental bottom line, and prosperity meaning financial bottom line. We're a for-profit company. We're not a nonprofit. We have investors. We have to give those investors the same return, financial return, as any other development company. And if not, we won't be in business. So it's really a question of balancing all three and being able to show the value of the other bottom lines so that they all work together. There's great synergy there. It's a question of finding that value, that sort of secret sauce, if you will. And we started out really with this kind of triple bottom line philosophy, and we've now evolved it into working with a system called One Planet Living. So One Planet Living is a sustainability framework that encompasses both environmental as well as social principles. There's 10 principles. I would encourage people to check it out online. Was founded by a company called Bioregional in England. And it's a very robust and complete way of thinking about design and sustainability, and really of finding value in projects that both encompass environmental aspects as well as social. And it's formed, I mean, One Planet Living is really about living within the resources of one planet. If the whole world lived the way we live in North America, we would need 5 planets to support us. If the whole world lived like Europeans live, we would need 3 planets to support us. So it's almost a visceral understanding of how urgent this is to say it's a one planet living. So how do you lead happy, healthy lives within the resources of one planet?
That actually sounds amazing. I will definitely look it up. I want to tell you, and I want to be honest, like every time, and I hear that from developers a lot, they say sustainability, the numbers don't work. From a business perspective, and as I said, like you can replace the word sustainability with design, you can replace the word design with other words that matter to your core business, and it doesn't matter what it is. But as you know, this audience is, and this concept of the webinar is really on the entrepreneurial perspective. How would you advise businesses to convince on the why for their clients and developers in this case?
Yeah, it's the question, in fact. So, I mean, one has to demonstrate value, and there's many ways to do that. If you're building a building for yourself, it's fairly easy to show a payback, to show a cost benefit. You spend a bit more on the envelope of a building, you reduce your energy costs. So for owner occupied buildings, it's a pretty simple answer. For rental buildings, it's also a pretty simple answer, because if you can invest more in the building itself, in the energy components, for example, you'll save energy and you'll reduce your operating costs. In the office world, it's become a must-have. Like most new office buildings are LEED Gold or LEED Platinum, or they just won't compete. So tenants are demanding it. The real challenge comes in condominium buildings, because there's a real disconnect between the developer who builds a building, sells it, walks away, and other than some responsibility for the first year operating costs, has no responsibility for the long-term operating of the building. And that is a real problem. There's many ways around that. One has to find ways to create a financial tools to basically build in a payback cost benefit model into a condominium structure. So for example, we've done green loans. So you can take on a typical building, you might say, we're going to spend an extra $750,000 or $1 million on better envelope, better mechanical system, whatever. And that cost will not be part of our capital cost. So we're not needing to sell the building for more. We can compete with the guy down the street, but that will become a loan that's paid back by the condominium corporation through the energy savings they will achieve. So it's a way of creating that payback formula within a condo structure. The benefits are quite a few. First of all, you get a lower carbon building, you get better energy performance, you get security for the future condo owners, and it doesn't necessarily cost them more, because if you've done it right, the energy savings is paying for the amortization of the better system you've put in. Another system.
Sounds like it.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
A similar approach can be taken with geothermal. So we've done geothermal now on most of our projects and continue to do them. Geothermal is very expensive to put in as a capital cost, but we bring in a third-party provider who will design, build, operate, maintain, and finance that infrastructure. So it doesn't affect our own capital cost or own budget. Again, the payback, the geothermal system provider will set up a contract with the future condominium corporation. So they're paying for the amortization of that system over 30 years. At the end of 30 years, they own it. But in the meantime, they've got, excuse me, security of energy costs going forward. They know they're in a low carbon building. And the rooftops are now freed up. Instead of a lot of big mechanical equipment on the roof, you can have a green roof. You can have an outdoor terrace.
It sounds like a no-brainer, really. The mechanisms and the structure that you just described. What are you noticing as the adoption in the industry from your typical condo developers out there? Is there more adoption these days compared to 5-10 years ago?
There is. It's slow. As you well know, our industry is very conservative, very slow moving. Everybody's always looking in the rearview mirror instead of looking ahead. Like, what worked on the last project? What did I learn from the last project? How can I repeat those successes? So it's not a very innovative model. I mean, it's interesting. My partner in Ottawa, John Westindy, who actually started Windmill, his background is in venture capital, and he decided to found Windmill with a strong green focus, because it was the only way he saw of seeking innovation in this industry. He saw that environmental and energy, generally an environmental approach was the way to develop innovation in the real estate industry. So you're right. The industry as a whole is very slow moving. We work on 3 different platforms. We work as a developer, but we also work as a consultant, and we also are starting a real estate fund. So as a developer, we can control our own projects, and we've learned some, I think, valuable lessons in those projects. We also have a consulting platform called Urban Equations. So we act as third-party consultants to other developers, to municipalities, to nonprofits, to governments, sort of taking the lessons that we've learned as developers to a wider audience and hopefully achieve greater impact far beyond our own projects. So that's one way we take those lessons and try and apply them through in a wider world where we can have more impact. And finally, we're just now starting a real estate fund called the One Planet Living Fund, which is rolling out late this year and early next, where we will actually have a lot of very interesting impact investors investing in this fund to provide equity for projects that achieve triple bottom line results that will satisfy the One Planet Living framework, both for ourselves as developers, but also with other developers. So we could partner with other groups, be the sort of sustainability partner, if you will, in that partnership, but hopefully have impact, again, far beyond our own world of projects, where individually we might be able to do 1 or 2 projects a year, but through partnerships, we could hopefully have far more wide-ranging impact.
It's wonderful. You mentioned earlier that it's not easy being green, as Kermit the Frog said. Can you give an example of an experience where, you know, the obstacle was massive and it looked like the situation was dire, but then you still managed to pull through somehow, and it was a big growth experience for you?
Well, in a way, every project has its challenges, I suppose. I'll give you an interesting example is the Zibi project in Ottawa, Gatineau. So this is a project that Windmill started probably 6 or so years ago. We're actually no longer involved in the implementation of it, but we did get the project started. We got all the initial rezoning process done, and it's now being done by part of the original Windmill team and Dream have taken over the project. But Zibi is a 37-acre project in the Ottawa River, basically on islands between Ottawa and Gatineau. So it straddles 2 cities, straddles 2 provinces. The National Capital Commission also has control of the planning there. It's basically in the river course, so Conservation Authority has say. There was remediation issues, there were heritage issues because it was an old industrial site for 100 years, making pulp and paper and wood products. And there were 2 Indigenous groups because the Ontario Algonquins don't really talk to the Quebec Algonquins, so we had sort of multiple stakeholders there. So it was potentially, you know, full of landmines in terms of navigating that process. We started with the One Planet Living framework, and before when we started our community engagement process, we didn't even talk about design. We talked about our intention to do a triple bottom line development that would satisfy both environmental and social, create social impacts. And we got huge buy-in from both communities, from all the diverse stakeholders. And we actually got the rezoning done in 6 months, which is astounding. And I think really because of the very strong commitment we made and the buy-in to that from both sides of the river. I'll give you a very specific example there, which is really interesting. So straddling a border like that's very challenging because you're half in Ontario, half in Quebec. We wanted to use the Quebec electrical grid because it's cleaner. It's based on hydroelectricity. It has no gas-fired, almost no gas-fired plants. So it's a much cleaner electrical grid. But you're not allowed to take electricity across the border there's regulatory barriers to that. But we developed a district energy system. So we have hot and cold pipes that cross the border because the development straddles the border, but it's powered on the Quebec side. So we're using the Quebec energy, the cleaner grid, to power the pumps that move the energy around, but we're, rather than taking electricity across the border, we're just taking hot and cold water, which we're allowed to do. So it was a sort of an arbitrage on the district, using the district energy system to enable a better outcome based on navigating what are always regulatory challenges in any project.
That's a brilliant story. You mentioned the urban equation. Can you tell us why you decided to have a sister company? What's the story behind that? Why even to offer consulting services to begin with? Why not having under the Windmill brand? I mean, it is under the Windmill, but you get it. Why it has this separate entity?
Well, it's a good question. And interestingly, we used to try and keep them very separate because we thought, you know, developers would not want to talk to our consulting company because they would be afraid of proprietary information. Maybe municipalities wouldn't want to hire a quote developer, or, you know, a company that was associated with a developer, because there's historical animosity sometimes between municipalities and developers. But in the end, we realized there was great synergy between the two companies, that in fact, we should celebrate that we're two sides of the same coin and not really try and keep it in the background. Having Urban Equation means that we have a much wider range of what we can do. So we can work with municipalities, we can work with other developers, we can work with nonprofits and achieve far greater impact than we could with our own company. We also, some of those consulting projects sometimes become development projects. So it becomes almost like a pipeline for development projects. Not always, but it's a standalone company and it works on its own. But it will very often bring in work on the development side. And conversely, having the experience as developers really informs the consulting practice, because as sustainability consultants, we often hear from other developers, oh, well, that doesn't work because the numbers don't work, because that doesn't work with our pro forma. We can say, well, we are developers, we know how the numbers work. So we can take our experience as developers and as making the business case for sustainability and offer that to others to try and help them understand that urban equation.
What advice would you give your younger self, or, you know, and there, I'm looking at the list of the attendees, and either, you know, young professionals who would like to have their own development firm, but also architects, lawyers, planners. What advice would you give us?
Stay true to your beliefs. You know, I would say fundamentally, you know, don't give up. Don't take no for an answer. There are ways to do it and find your path, but be flexible. You know, when you're starting out, one often has to do work that's maybe not the ideal project just to get yourself started. There's all the cycles of the economy that one has to deal with. I mean, I could spend hours telling you about the various cycles I've been through and how, you know, at any given point, it totally changed my career. So whatever career path I thought I had, it ended up being something quite different because of running into one recession or the other along the way. So on the one hand, I think you need to stay true to what's really important to you, but also to be flexible enough and not be rigid. So you have to respond to conditions as they evolve. I think flexibility is a key in any endeavor. Like, you just can't be rigid.
And Alex, we always ask each of our speakers, is there a book or a podcast or a speaker, a film that really influenced and resonated with you in the past that you would like to share with people?
Well, I'd say the book that really turned me around in a way was Natural Capitalism. which is was by Paul Hawken. This is maybe going back 10 or 15 years now, so it's not a new book, but it really opened my eyes to how economic factors and environmental factors are not at odds, but they can work together, and one can reinforce the other. So the power of that was quite influential, I guess, to me earlier in my career. A film that I recently saw that was, I thought, very, very powerful was the David Attenborough film called, I think it's called My Life on the Planet or something like that. It just recently came out. You can Google it. It's on YouTube. And David Attenborough, as you may know, has done many nature films over the years, but this is his real kind of legacy project, if you will. The guy's 93 years old now, phenomenal fellow. And it's really his plea to maintain diversity, biodiversity in the world, and reduce carbon in order to basically, make the world, keep the world livable for future generations. And it's beautifully done. It's very powerful. It starts on a very positive note. It goes into a very dark place because we are in a very dark place in many ways, but it ends on a powerful note. So I found it really, really moving and quite inspirational.
That was a beautiful note. Thank you. And we, as I always promise, we keep our webinars no longer than 30 minutes. And that was a perfect segment to wrap up with. Alex, thank you so much for this insightful webinar and discussion. And to the audience, thank you. That was the last one for 2020. We'll see you again in 2021 with more speakers and guests. And thank you for being with us during this crazy year, and came up with this concept and supported us, and with your comments and emails and all the love. And with that, have a wonderful holiday season and see you next year. Alex, thank you again.
Thank you very much. Be well, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Alex. Yes,
Okay,
see you all in 2021. Bye-bye.